So I hope not to be a Portlandia character. I think that's been one of the things. How many folks are from the Pacific Northwest here? Let me see it. And how many folks are from everywhere else in the world? All right, so I think everywhere else in the world has the Northwest outnumbered, so that's probably a good thing. But just so you know, we don't use umbrellas here. You know, it's just rain. You're going to dry off. So my advice is to leave the umbrellas back in the room. Because everybody, if you're walking around with an umbrella, everybody here knows you're not from here. So this is my men's journal glamour shot that took us about, I don't know, it takes you a long time to do the marketing. After you do the sort of the year-long wrestling match of writing a book, and you think you're done, that's actually right when it starts. And so, you know, the cover, picking the color of the little things on the book, and you know, and getting pictures was a big part of it. But you know, I started my trek, I guess, to this place a long time ago. I grew up in a small town in Illinois where at the confluence, the Illinois, Missouri, and Mississippi systems come together, a little place called Wood River. It's where Lewis and Clark started their journey west. And my dad was a carpenter, and we were the first generation off the farm. So what we did, my summers growing up, were I would frame up houses all summer long, and then for vacation, I would go buck hay for one grandpa or the other. And what I found out, my grandpa Whitworth was the kind of guy who would work all day, and then to unwind after supper, we would go down in the low field and we would hoe beans. And we would do that until the sunset. And he would, you know, I thought we were really putting the hurt on the weeds, but the truth is, he was down there kind of putting some ideas in my head. I didn't realize it at the time, but I realized it while I was writing the book. When you write a book, you're not discovering much, you're just backing up the arguments you've been making for the last decade. That's kind of the truth. But what I did find out about me was why it was I cared at all. And my grandpa used to say that no man has the right to take more from the land than the land can take. And so what he said in his simple way, I mean, he got maybe an 8th grade education, but what he said, I take care of the land, it takes care of me. What he saw was that conservation and stewardship work well when they're working right, that the economy and the environment can work together. And you know, when you're 5 years old, you believe your grandpa, and then I went on from there, went out into the world, you know, went to college, went out and got a job. And the world said that the environment and the economy are the two biggest forces on Earth, and they are at war. One loses when the other one wins. And so that either made, you know, my grandpa a liar, or the system that we have built wrong. And I choose to believe that we built it wrong, and I also choose to believe that we can fix it. And so what I did was I looked back over the history of not just our organization to distill out what were the things that we have done right over the years, kind of intuitively, but also look at other sectors of the world and what's gone well and what's not gone well. And so just for a minute, I know everybody here is employed, but just imagine you were interviewing with another company. And you've done well in the interview. You know, you're now sitting down with the CEO, and it's your turn to start asking questions. And you say, so, tell me what's going on with your business. How are you doing versus the competition? How are you doing against your targets? How much money are you investing in R&D? What are the threats that are going to take you down that you can't see or don't understand? How do you use data and information? And all of these answers come back to you, I don't know. We're not really looking at that. That's exactly how the environmental community has been dealing with, you know, environmental issues for a couple of decades now, right? We haven't really looked at things in terms of using numbers, using data, that we can. So if you start getting in the business of asking yourself hard questions about whether or not you're getting the job done, you have to be ready to answer the questions truthfully. And the fact of the matter is, we are not in any way lining up on the issues that need to be dealt with in the coming era. And we've been kind of off the mark for a while now. And one of my big motivations in writing the book was to credibly call the question, are we on track for what it was that you all thought we were going to try to do? Now, the modern environmental movement, which is no longer a movement, by the way, it's a sector. It's middle-aged, and it's not looking to innovate too awful much. And so they don't really my contemporary, I'm kind of on the young end of the old or the old end of the young. And the people that have been working so hard to do so much good have come up short. Environmental returns have maxed. We are kind of done using the old methods of advocacy and litigation, right? Those have a time and a place, and in large part, those are past. We have to move beyond sort of keeping bad things from happening, and we have to start making good things happen. So this is a picture of course, the Earth. So this is the atmosphere. This is not a climate change talk, so I'm not going to use that. That's all the water on Earth. That includes all the salt water, right? And so it is a precious commodity. But the biosphere is the ultimate closed loop. And what we have essentially had is open-ended accounting. We don't have a way, or haven't had historically, a way to track our inputs and our outcomes effectively. And that's all coming home now and causing us a lot of problems. This is a scattergraph by the United Nations that really looks at, Earth per person. This is 1961, right? That's pretty simple math. How much land area do you have and how many bodies do you have? 2006, obviously this is going down, right? If we're going to be driving toward 10 billion by somewhere between 2040 and 2050, it's going to go down again. Here's the UN poverty line, right? This is not a high bar, but essentially and all these are the countries in the world as to where they are in relationship to those two measures. And what's striking about this map is you want to be kind of below the Earth per person and beyond the poverty line. That means you are having high human development and you are within the carrying capacity of the Earth. The interesting thing about this graph is not a single country in the world is here. Not one, not even the Nords, right? And so what you could say is, oh boy, we're in trouble, and you would be right if all we did was business as usual. This doesn't work. This is already not working, right? And so Malcolm Preston, who is the head of sustainability program within PricewaterhouseCoopers, an accountant, obviously, he says, this isn't bad news. This is actually the greatest economic opportunity in the history of mankind. If we can properly account for our impacts as we drive everybody down into that sustainable place, we will have greater prosperity, although different prosperity than we've ever known. Okay? We just have to rethink how we do things, rethink how we track things. So that all led to my book. I'm going to read you the words on the screen. I hate people to do that. And if you guys are doing that for your PowerPoint today, shame on you. Don't do that to your people. Tell them what you think. But anyway, I didn't have the name. I didn't have the name of this book. In fact, I had a little bit of a fight with my publishers about what I should name the book. I'll tell you later what I thought it should be named. But this term came out of the writing. And it really comes down to figuring out how do we track things so that we can pick up speed, so that we know that we're allocating every dollar, every calorie of effort, and every piece of work moving in the right direction in a way that we know, not that we think is good, but we know is good, right? So what dropped out of this, and I looked across agriculture, I looked first at the environment, I looked at agriculture, I looked at philanthropy, I looked at business, I looked at government. And what I found was this thing, these 5 elements, actually can pretty much scale from the program level to the organization level to the regional level to the national level. It's really kind of wild. And I am not an academic. I'm a very, very, very practical person. I like being in rooms where there are not any academics and where there are people that are trying to build something. So the first one, this is actually a military term that, for me, one of the most interesting things is how it was used by Andy Grove, who ran Intel for several years. And basically, what he's talking about is like, if you're going to run your business exactly how it was run a while ago when you started, you're going to start and you're going to grow, and ultimately, if you keep on doing that, you're going to ride that thing down because the world is going to change, the fundamentals of your business are going to change, and if you're not tuned up to that, then you're in trouble, right? So sometimes it's easy to understand when things are changing, right? This is, of course, the Cuyahoga River in Ohio. I think that the photo was taken actually in like 1952, right? But it wasn't on the cover of Time until like 1969, which I think there's a great movie script in that by, sort of an active newspaper editor. But the Cuyahoga caught on fire like in the 30s and the 40s and the 50s. And then it just became popularized in the 60s. But when you see a river on fire, even you non-academics can understand that's not right. Right? And the rest of America did. And they said, this is bullshit. Are you kidding me? We're not going to have our rivers catch on fire. That's when we made out of thin air all of the beginnings of all of what have now become our environmental regulations. Right? And if you look at any successful social movement, whether it's votes for women, civil rights, somebody raises their hand and says, hey, this is wrong. And everybody goes, yeah, that is wrong. We should do something about that. So we built all of those regulations. Let me check something. Okay. So we live in a world now where our rivers don't catch on fire, right? But the truth is, we're not getting at the problem. Today, 47 years in, actually it's not 47, it's about 45 years after the Clean Water Act, 55% of our nation's waters are still impaired. Right? So pretty words on paper ultimately don't matter. Colorado River, a river strong enough to carve the Grand Canyon from stone, no longer strong enough to reach its mouth because we don't manage our water in an optimized way, because we don't track it. Dead zones. We all like cheap food. You had some this morning. Actually, I don't know what you guys charge to come in here. The food itself was cheap. The conference was expensive. It's a laugh line, people. I guess it was pretty cheap. I think you can double the price next year. It'll be a much funnier joke next year. But anyway, so the fact is that we don't track all of the things that we are sending down the waterway here. But everything in the world has a water component. But the way we manage water is as an input into generally another more valuable crop, as opposed to having water priced by a market and managed as an asset, right? It's just managed as an input, and you never see it, you never think about it. But everything that we do, everything that we make, everything that we use has water in it. We just don't know it. It's invisible to us, right? Until now. So, if we can understand what the real score is, then we can start naming where we need to go, right? The answer is not we need to do more of the same. The more of the same gets us 55% of our rivers still in trouble after 45 years of effort. That's what more of the same gets us. So, this guy that founded Google, he believes in the power of 10x, right? Which is, I don't want 10% improvements. I want 1,000% improvements. And that's why, if you hold that up against the patch and tinker world that we all live in, right? It's just, if you have those humongous problems, and all you're going to do is just chip, 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 chip away, I got news for you. The work that you do is not going to matter. I mean, I put us right in I'm not saying you guys, but I'm saying my organization. We're going to spend our whole lives effecting essentially nothing, right? And I still think that's true. Until we get some scale, the scale that I believe that is needed, I will say we are not going to, until we do things that are fixing problems the size of, say, the dead zone. I mean, for me, if we don't fix the dead zone, which we can fix it, you guys might like this little statistic. If you engage in targeted wetland restoration within the Mississippi Basin, it's really the Missouri, Mississippi, Ohio River Basin, of less than 2% of the land mass, and you engage in riparian reforestation, native riparian reforestation, for all of you poplar guys. I mean, there are poplars in the Midwest, that could work. But of less than 4% of that basin, you can knock down the dead zone by 80%, right? Let's do that. That is so crazy that we're not doing that, right? But we're just not lined up to do it. But anyway, as a lawyer, what they do is they teach you in law school how to play the environmental regulation game. We know how to stop projects. That's what they teach. That is, we are the great green wall of no. And they will tell you that with the agencies, particularly now with the hamstrung budgets that they have, the underfunded science staffs, and honestly, the archaic tools, they missed a step in their regulatory hoops. And if you find it, you can stop it. Everybody knows that by the second year of law school. But if the mandate you get as a conservationist is hold the line, that is a 0% improvement target. If you hold a 0% improvement target up against a 1,000% improvement target, what do you think is going to get you there faster, right? So we have to change this mindset. We have to get a lot more aggressive about what we say we want to do. Australia did it. Now their drought got their attention so much that they took all their water rights system and they reloaded, right? They went from, what were akin to prior appropriation, full allotments, full water rights, to shares, prorated, that toggle to the physical environment, the actual amount of water that they have. Then they put some aside for the environment and for municipal use and all industrial uses. Those minimums are hit. And then above that line, you can do with your water what you want. And what we saw in the Murray-Darling Basin is they don't grow rice anymore. They don't grow low-value crops when the water is priced by a market and managed as an asset. Farmers are many things, but they can certainly do math, right? We have to set up those opportunities, and we can go big, right? California will be doing something like this. They've already put it on paper, right, with their Sustainable Groundwater Management Act 2014. They have the ability to have water budgets. The question is, are they going to use quant and design constructs so that they actually can make those pretty words on paper have a through line that goes all the way to the ground? Innovation. So what's really interesting to me is in the 1960s, 1970s, the great big behemoth was industry and business. And the new kids on the block that wanted to innovate and do all kinds of crazy stuff were the environmental community. That's flipped completely. Now the Greens are so trenched up, so stuck in a business model that is so hand-to-mouth that they cannot invest in research and development, and they do not change. They have one pitch, right? They have one fastball, right? On the edges, we're starting to see some change, but by and large, the way we operate is the way we operated in the 1970s, the environmental community. Whereas the business, I mean, these guys have like an endless vault of stuff that is being brought out every quarter. So this map, which you've seen before, the worst thing, I mean, this is a horrible map. This is a horrible map to take. If you want a scorecard on you doing not a good job, this is for you, right? But what's worse about this map is it took us 12 years in this country to make that map. 12 years. 12 years when we have 1,300 satellites circling the Earth every 90 minutes with the ability to send high-resolution photos that have all kinds of modeling characteristics to it. We don't have to wait 12 years for anything. Anything. There is no reason anything in this world should take 12 years. I don't see it. I mean, think of something else in your life that takes 12 years to grow. I mean, a tree, I guess that's one thing. But aside from trees, I mean, we can do better than this. So, speed is good, but you got to know what you're doing with the speed, right? We're generating a lot of data. In a month, it would be, or let's see, I think in a month, it would be like up to the ceiling, right? In pennies. All around the world. That's a lot of data. And there are some folks that are putting it to use. It's not the data, it's the insight from the data that you can derive from all of those things. This is Sonoma County Water Agency. They're doing some interesting things. They teamed up with IBM just to get some basic water use information. Now they're starting, really to find out the leaks, so they can get on those, not waste the water. But now they're throwing in weather forecasting and climate data, and they're just getting better and better and better. So there are, what I discovered in the book, I looked across everything, there are great examples in every sector, in each one of those sectors that I talked about. The problem is, the awesomeness is the exception, not the rule, right? We have to make it the rule, and we can. That's kind of the entire thing about my book is I didn't spend, like most environmental tomes, 90% of my words on the problem, with sort of, the Eeyore edition of, woe is me, we're never going to fix it, people are bad, blah, Like, we need solutions. We need a pathway to get out of this. I don't want to talk about the problem. I will cop to the problem to spend more time on how do we get from there to here. So, what Sonoma County is doing is great, but it's still pretty coarse level. It's still pretty trailing edge. This is some of the work that we've done over in, this is some of the work we've done over in Idaho, looking at sediment and phosphorus loading in the Snake River Basin. And this is, if we were online, I can drill down to each one of those fields. Now, those are not just properties, those are fields. We know how they've been used for the last decade. We know how much sediment comes off of them. We know if you engage in activity A, it'll drop that sediment load by 30%. If you do A and B, it'll drop it by 60%. If you do it A, B, and C, it'll drop it by whatever percent. And what this changes is the fundamentals of how environmental mitigation starts to happen. It also can change how environmental allocations from agencies can happen, because we have largely been throwing money at a problem and missing for a long time. So what this does is it changes the old dynamic of if you stop a process and you hold up the project stagecoach until somebody gives you enough money so that you feel good, like you've done your job as a conservation group, right? What it says is, look, here is your allocation. It is these many tons of sediment, and you should not pay a dime to anybody with a blue field, right? You should focus on the brown and the red because you get the greatest amount of uplift for the least amount of cost. And whether it costs you $20 or $200 million, we don't care because it's driven by quant. It's not driven by religion or ideology. It's driven by quantitative realities. And that is a game changer. That will help us get out of throwing money at the problem and missing and start being very precise with how we spend our time and our money. And that's really important because we don't have endless dollars for this stuff. Now, the interesting thing, you take somebody like Oregon Watershed Enhancement Board, which is the largest salmon restoration, probably the largest restoration fund in the world. We were the primary petitioners on that ballot measure. In Oregon, we're pretty backwater. We don't really know how to govern like a grown-up state, so we do it by ballot measure. That's a laugh line, but it's a sad laugh line, unfortunately. So that thing grew from about $2 million a biennium to $100 million a biennium. But the fact of the matter is, they've been throwing that money at the problem and missing too. Because it's done politically more than it's done quantitatively, right? They spread it out by county. You know, they keep everything going. Just as, I mean, it's not like they're unique. USDA spends about $7 to $9 billion a year, and they don't know what they're getting, right? So that's kind of how this is done, right? Any landowner that raises their hand does a project. But that is an incredibly stupid way to manage money, right? We have to say no to landowners that don't give us any environmental uplift, right? And we have to say no to landowners that give us, that we pay them $1 and we don't get at least $1 worth of uplift back. And in fact, for my money, we have to achieve gain. Holding the line is no longer good enough. We had done that at the dawn of the Industrial Revolution, great. But it's too late for that. We are way, 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 way behind. So every deal that we do needs to render environmental gain. And my argument is that and there are several of these in the book, you can save money and get environmental gain. You can put people to work and get environmental gain. So the old economy versus environment thing, it's a falsehood. It turns out my grandpa is not a liar, right? And so we did a deal down on the Rogue River system. We started this deal, a long time ago because this was a very exotic idea. You know, we've talked about ecosystem services for a long time. If you guys have been around this issue for a while, it's been the holy grail. But it got to the point where it was nearly meaningless because you had this situation where you had the Greens were saying, man, we're going to harness capitalism for the good of the environment. It's going to be great. And then you had the money saying, hey, I'll put my money in if I can get my money out and do the right thing. That's a bonus. Sounds super. The problem is the money didn't really understand the regulated environment or the environment itself physically. And the Greens didn't understand or trust money. So it was not a match made in heaven, right? It was a mismatch. And so what we did was, it's a white paper rich environment. But the number of deals that actually go down is pretty low. It's pretty low. And so what we did is said, heck with all the white papers, we're going to go do a deal. And so what we did, we figured out who's buying what are they buying, what's required, what do we have to do to make sure that it's not just a greenwash. And there are plenty of things called, environmental or ecosystem service transactions that did make a deal go over, but the environment didn't get anything out of it, right? The Chesapeake Bay is example number one, right? You're letting people move through these things, but you're not really getting and quantifying the environmental uplift at scale. And so we have to make sure that every single deal is the same biologically, legally, and transactionally, across the board. The first deal has to be like the fifth, has to be like the 5,000. In the United States, 25 cents is a quarter, whether you're in Portland, Oregon, or Portland, Maine. And it should be the same with this kind of stuff. Standards are absolutely crucial, and we're just not getting there. There's no one that's committed to getting there. And until we do get that, we're not going to get the scale that we need. So the short story on this, City of Medford, 100,000 people, down on the Rogue, it's on a salmon system, so temperature is a real requirement for migration for them. This plant, they had a requirement, they had to offset 300 million kilocalories. Under the rules in Oregon, which we helped draft, we do a 2-to-1 deal, right? So a 2-to-1 ratio on the kilocalories that we can generate through environmental practices or green infrastructure. We were up against, it wasn't a chilling tower, it was actually a big hole in the ground. They were going to pump the water out, let it sit in the ground for a while, cool it down before they pumped it back into the Rogue River system. That whole deal was going to cost them between 16 and 20 million bucks. Okay? And they were going to get precisely 300 million kilocalories a day, which kilocalories is it's a thermal unit. 300 million kilocalories a day. For $6.5 million, we are building them 600 million kilocalories a day. We are paying landowners to grow bushels of nature, which they like growing stuff. You don't want to say you're doing conservation. You say you're growing something. And they're like, sign me up, buddy. So 600 million kilocalories a day. Farmers are getting paid. We're putting local folks to work. Local nurseries are growing as a result of the business. We got, 5-year contract, and we have a 20-year maintenance and monitoring cycle that is built into that $6.5 million. 20 years, which is unprecedented in conservation for this kind of stuff. And, for the city council, they are in compliance and they're saving money, right? That's a win-win, win-win, win. And even though we're only counting the kilocalories of sunlight that are being blocked by the trees we're planting, the tree is doing more than just having temperature benefit, right? It has sediment runoff benefit, which we can calculate, but we don't count toward this. I mean, we don't double dip. We sell it one time. So you got sediment. You have carbon uptake, which we can calculate, that we're not counting this. You have nutrient uptake, which we can calculate, but we're not taking credit for it. And there are, of course, wildlife benefits, right? So for us, as an environmental group, a conservation group really, this is a winner on its own merits. And so for us, we are looking for more and more of those things. But it does have to do with, being able to reimagine things and then go out and make them happen. I could have given you all that a little bit closer. But these are the kind of ideas that it takes to move from this to this. Otherwise, we're all just going to stay busy. In the end, we're not going to pass anything much worth keeping on. And so that's why about 10 years ago, we decided that we would use a mantra that if we were in charge and we came from we landed on Earth today from another planet and we were in charge and we needed to build something to make something better, what will we build? And if we can answer that question with some granularity, then we have to go out and build it, right? In that time, we have grown tenfold in terms of our operating budget with more and more money going on the ground. I don't believe in getting bigger. I believe in getting better. We ultimately need people to use our tools. We've got software patents now. We're looking at driving new users of everything from, remote sensing tablets that can go out and do our work for us. The tablets can't do that, but we can quantify everything that's going on and put it to use. It's not just going out and collecting data. By the time we're back in the office, that data has gone up into the cloud, back down into the spreadsheet, through an algorithm that can calculate our survival rates for red cedar 1 foot above waterline, 2 foot above waterline, 3 foot above waterline, which drives into how do we design our next project to increase survival rates and also start to make other orders with nurseries to drive down our costs. Because nonprofit is a legal status. It's not an ambition of ours, right? And so we have a third of our revenue now is earned. We will be kicking off a holding company, and we will begin investing in B Corps probably over the next couple of years within the water domain, because we feel like we know things that other people don't know. But the point is not to put a monopoly on that. The point is to get the whole world working like this. Otherwise, we're sort of stuck. So, buy the book. There's a lot more in there. That's from my publisher. But the one thing I did, I finished the book with a quote from Jim Gennard, who was the founder of Oakley, the sunglasses. And it was interesting the way he approached it. He was a BMX, a motorcycle kid, right? And he got tired of, as he would go on these longer races, his hands would get sweatier and sweatier. And he's like, man, this sucks. I would like it if I could have a grip that would get grippier the sweatier my hands got. And all the grip makers said, that's crazy. You'll never, ever be able to do that. Well, he went out and did it, right? He said he was going to do something that was completely contra to what everyone had said before. And then he stuck with it, and he did it, right? And his quote was, everything in the world can and will be made better. The only questions that are left are when and by whom. And for us, my big motivation, I believe the only right answers there are now and by us. And so I appreciate the work that the folks in this room are doing, because in some sense, you're chasing that line, right? And that's the line that needs to be chased at this point in history. Thank you.